So why do we learn Angular? We learn Angular because it's the most popular client-side MVC. So there's other ones, there's React, there's Ember, there's other stuff. But right now, I think still at this moment, Angular is still the most popularly used one, most widely used one. So that's why we teach it. Makes building SPA apps really easy. SPA stands for single page application. So you're only going to have one file as your entry point, your index.html, and everything else is going to get loaded from there. So there's going to be no page reloads, there's going to be no actual page redirects. You're just going to be using Ajax to get HTML, to get CSS, to get JavaScript, and pulling it all into one file. There's this concept called two-way data binding in Angular, which says if you update HTML, it automatically updates your JavaScript variables for you. And if you update JavaScript variables, it'll automatically update your HTML for you. We're going to see how that works, and it's really cool. It gives you the ability to do a lot with very little code. And finally, it's used a lot in the industry, so it'll get you a job. I'd say more than anything else in this course, Angular is probably what I see pop up most in like junior web developer job postings, like requesting experience with Angular. So it'll be an important one to learn for that. We went through, we can get rid of this. There's going to be one more thing called client-side routes. So just like we have routes on our server, we're also going to have routes on our client now. So it's going to get a little bit confusing on that. We'll explain what exactly that is. Probably get into it later in the week, not as much at the start. And just like Rails, there's going to be a lot of Angular magic as well. So Rails did a bunch of stuff in the background that we had no idea why it was happening. Angular is going to be even worse than that. Angular takes JavaScript and turns it into a completely separate language almost, where there's Angular syntax that doesn't exist in JavaScript. It even changes, it doesn't just change JavaScript, it also changes HTML, it changes CSS. So it's going to be interesting. You guys are going to have to basically be learning a whole new language with Angular. And sadly, the error messages aren't very good. So a lot of times you actually have to know what's going on. You can't rely on the error messages to explain what's going on for you. But if you Google the error messages, generally, because it's so poorly documented, there's just thousands of Stack Overflow questions on these. So when you put the error messages into Google, it'll pop up. All right. So to set up, we're going to create, let's clear this back, create a new directory called intro Angular. Today we're just going to be working on a front-end only application, so there's going to be no server involved. We'll tie the server and stuff in, probably starting tomorrow. Intro Angular, create an index.html file, create a CSS directory, JS directory, create a JS controllers directory, and create CSS main.css, JS app.js, JS controllers, home controller.js. Okay. Whoa, what's that? I did it in the wrong file. Yep. All right. Let me get rid of all these. Okay, this is what you should have. This is one optional type of setup for Angular. There's no real convention in Angular for how things are set up. Everybody kind of does it their own way. Some people like having controllers inside of JavaScript. Some people have their controllers folder outside the JavaScript folder. Some people will have, instead of grouping things in the typical models use controllers fashion, they'll group things by feature. So if they have 6 subpages in their Angular, each of those subpages will have their own directory, and each of the subpages will have an HTML, CSS, and JavaScript file. So this is the way we're going to do it right now. You can do it your own way if you want. And I'm sure Dan will probably do it some other way when he does his. How do you normally set up your files?
That's almost exactly how we do it.
Cool.
Sometimes I leave that app.js at the root, but
Okay.
yeah, it's the same.
Alright.
Angular says. But today's lesson is going to be amazing. It always starts on the high end,
Yeah.
and it only goes downhill.
See? He has the exact same opinion.
After your first error, you'll know why.
Alright. So I'm going to type this manually out. You guys can copy it if you want, but I'll explain it as I go. This is the index.html file. So this is going to be the entry point for the application. So doc-type HTML, declare the usual HTML5. The first thing you're going to see Angular-ish is this ng app right here. So let's close this. All right. HTML ng app equals intro Angular. So I said that Angular is going to be modifying not just JavaScript, but also HTML and CSS. And this is the first example of that. Anything where you see what normally would be a property, but instead of being a property, it starts with ng dash. ng stands for Angular. Yeah. Obviously. Duh. So, what in HTML we call a property?
Welcome to the Hater's Ball.
I already love their naming conventions.
What HTML calls properties, Angular calls directives. So it's called like enhanced HTML. What it allows you to do, you'll see later on, is so you do ng dash and then the name of the Angular directive, and you'll set some sort of, in this case it's an app declaration. In other cases it might be a model or a controller you're setting on a div. All I'm going to say is this one, you have to have this in here. So if you run an application and you don't have this ng app declared at the top, you'll get a silent error that says absolutely nothing in the console and none of your code will work. And you'll stare at it wondering why for about 15 minutes, and then someone will be like, did you add the ng app up top? And you'll be like, nope, and that'll be your answer. So watch out for this one. It'll get you at least one time. Head, title. This you guys have seen before, nothing new here. Intro to Angular. Title. Okay, controller declaration. So we said Angular has controllers. This is going to be the first time you see the controller in action. So when you declare a controller in Angular, the controller has to have, let me type this out first. Controller has to have a scope, and the scope is going to be the div on which it's declared. So what I'm saying is home controller, any code I put in home controller is only going to apply to the code in the body. Because it's the body, that's actually going to be the whole page, because it's the body of the page. But I can, if I want, set up a div on the inside. So instead of having the whole body be the controller, I can do like div ng controller equals like div controller. It's div, and this would control, so any code that goes in the div controller would then only apply to code inside of this div. So if I put some lines of code here, so if I had div not in div controller, but still in home controller. So by that, all I'm saying is this div is still controlled by the home controller because it's inside the body, but it's not controlled by the div controller because it's not inside that div.
Is it common practice to have multiple controllers on the page?
Yep. You're going to have lots of controllers on the page. They're going to be nested inside each other. So inside here, it's just going to be like a variable scope. So the variable scope inner functions have access to the variables of outer functions. Inner controllers are going to have access to the scope of the outer controllers, but not the other way around. Same exact thing. So it's called lexical scoping.
And that's why if you see KR use controller as, that's controller as syntax. So instead of using $ scope, you will use this. And that makes it a lot easier for you guys if you're not running 100 scopes. You're not running scope dot something, scope dot something.
Yeah, this is actually like, this syntax right here, home controller as home, is a hack that some guy put together for Angular. That Angular actually doesn't support natively. And then people realized that it actually makes the code a lot clearer. So this became the standard instead of how Angular was designed, which we'll go into later. But Angular was originally not designed to be an entire MVC framework. It was designed internally by Google as just a manipulation for forms. And people extended it from there and slowly turned it into a framework. So there's a lot of artifacts left over that aren't the cleanest implementations. And that's actually the reason why they built Angular 2 out. So there's Angular 1, there's Angular 2. They're totally incompatible with each other. We're learning Angular 1. Angular 2, 1.5. Yeah, we're learning Angular 1.5, which is like a bridge between Angular 1 and Angular 2. Angular 2 came out like 5 weeks ago or something.
A little bit before that, yeah.
A little bit before
But
that.
it is pretty.
Yeah, it's good, but nobody's adopted it yet, so we don't bother teaching it. Yeah.
You'll be able to learn Angular 2 after
Yeah.
on your own.
It's not too much of a stretch from 1.5. And people won't expect you to know it if you apply for a job. So they're going to be like, oh, have you seen it? Have you worked with Angular 2? No one's going to expect that. It hasn't been long enough. Okay. Let's go back to not having this. All right. Okay, more custom Angular syntax. Cool. Those of you that were exposed to handlebars last week might have seen this before. Yeah. Div, test, div. Okay, so what it's saying is this is regular HTML, div, test, all that's normal. But then there's this little double bracket syntax. So double bracket syntax right here in the middle. And this right here is saying execute Angular code right here. So inside of these braces, you can put in any piece of code that works in Angular, and it will replace the result. So whatever the result of this is, it'll replace into the HTML. So instead of showing up as test, brace, brace, 1 + 1, close brace, it'll show up as test 2, because that's the result of 1 + 1. So any sort of code that works in Angular, you'll be able to put into here. It's not just Angular, since Angular is built on top of JavaScript. Any code that works in JavaScript can also go into here. And it'll automatically replace it into the HTML for you.
You can't do conditionals.
No. Yeah, I don't know, actually no. I don't think so. Yeah. But you can do you can't do conditionals, but you can do ternary syntax. Or if you do like this, home.test, so home.test is true or false. And then you have different values based on that. So you can basically do if-else statements with this syntax instead. Yeah. And you'll see a lot of people do it, even though you really shouldn't.
No, I heavily discourage you putting logic in your binding of data.
Yes.
Just put it all in your controllers.
You should really be using this for nothing more than, even 1 + 1 is something you shouldn't be doing here. I'm putting it in as a test. You should only be printing out variables here. So what you do is you calculate the result of either a function or a variable inside your controller, and then you do nothing but output the result of that into here. Otherwise it gets really messy. You have JavaScript in like 15 different places. One thing goes wrong, a silent error pops up that makes no sense, and and you're forced to trace out every little bit of code you have to figure out where the error is. You'll see soon. You'll get burned by it. You'll realize on your own. Okay, so those are those two parts. Let's add the actual CDN in for Angular. I have an old CDN maybe still accidentally on this slide, so I'm going to go in and grab Angular 1.5 CDN. Let's do that.
I
Best.
think 157 is the most stable version.
157?
Yeah.
1.5.7. Here we go. I'll Slack this link out too. Yeah, so you'll notice that there's like 100 Angular files if you go to this. We're really just looking for the one that's angular.min.js right there. So you're going to have to do a search to find it probably. I'll just send the link out, make it easy. Why are there so many? Because Angular is a bunch of, Google believes in splitting up each of their modules in a modular way or whatever. So there's a bunch of authorized modules for Angular, extensions and stuff, and each of those is one of these. So these are all the Google authorized extensions to Angular. Angular was built by Google, by the way, if you guys don't know. That's why Facebook built React, because they didn't want to use Google software in their code. So, yeah. Surprise. It's a... Just .min. Yeah, this is the only one I'm including. Just angular.min.js. If you don't want the minified version, if you want the development version, just get rid of the min and make it AngularJS, and you'll have all the lovely code of Angular available to you. It'll make no sense, so it doesn't matter. Alright, so that's the Angular CDN. Lots of people like to include the jQuery CDN as well, along with the Angular CDN. We're not going to right now, but you can later if you want. But we do have to include our app.js file in that controller file. So right now I have controllers, home controller, and app.js. So home controller is going to apply right here. And app.js is going to be the file that sets everything up. So we're going to need both of those. I'll include a note right here. Angular CDN must come first. If you try and load your app.js file before the Angular CDN comes up, you'll get an error. The error won't make any sense, and you'll be wondering what the hell went wrong. So the CDN must come first, and after that you include your app.js file. So this is the reason in MeanStack that they rename the express file to server.js instead of keeping it as app.js. Because now when you have Angular, you're going to have an app.js on the Angular side, so you need to rename that other file server.js so it's clear what the separation is. So you have app.js, and again, the app.js file has to come first. It has to come before any controller files you have. After you have the app.js file loaded, it doesn't matter what order the rest of the files come in. But for just that one, it has to be up top, otherwise you'll get another weird error. Okay, so I'm including controller.js, right? Okay. Alright, so I'm including the home controller.js file as well. So I'll put in our Angular app files.
You know, back in the day, Angular wouldn't run without jQuery.
Still does, right? Oh, wouldn't run without
It
jQuery?
would not run.
Oh, didn't know that. Did you ever have that problem?
Yeah. Not now, but it's nice.
Okay, Angular app blah blah blah, close HTML, cool. So that is the end of the index.html file. You've seen already that Angular is going to throw itself everywhere into all your files. And that's not going to stop. So app.js, this one's a lot simpler. All you're telling Angular is that you would like to declare a new module. You're going to give it the name intro Angular. So what you're saying is, in the JavaScript, I have a file called intro Angular. And in my index.html, I also have an app called intro Angular. So what Angular does is it goes into your app.js file, it looks up the name of the application you have here, and then it goes into your HTML and tries to match it somewhere. So these two names, the ng app and the Angular module you declare, have to be the same. There's even a little bit of a typo, which I'm sure you guys will have at some point. Forget to capitalize a letter, it'll throw an error saying we don't know what your application is. And this second argument right here is a list of dependencies. So I said that Angular has a bunch of extensions, and we saw there was like 100 of them. If you were to include one of those extensions, or if you were to include some other custom extension or module to Angular, you'd include it as a dependency right here. And this will be a pretty common theme in Angular. You're going to have to include dependencies for everything you do.
You have more than one Angular now?
You can. I would advise you not to. It'll get confusing.
Because everything that lives inside of the Angular module, it's a file, and that's the shell page. It's only requiring one module.
Right. So what you can do is you can have a separate module. So you can have Angular.module, Angular helpers. There's a lot of people have this one. So if you want to have a piece of code you reuse across multiple Angular applications, you can set up another module with that name, and then include Angular helpers as a dependency to the first application. But what ends up happening when you do this is you'll have code you write in Angular helpers that isn't always available to you where you would expect it in your first application. It just turns into a disaster. So I would advise you to, as far as possible, avoid doing that. A lot of people, when they write tutorials, all these fancy people on the internet like to write tutorials for Angular, which, by the way, there's like thousands of Angular tutorials out there. They like to write tutorials that have multiple modules in them to use best practice or whatever, and you'll try and copy paste it and use it, and the first thing you'll do is run into like 15 errors, and you won't know how to solve them. It's a pain in the ass to have multiple modules in Angular unless you really know what's going on in the application. So I would try and avoid it as far as possible as you're starting out. And then later on, like during the project week, if you feel like you've gotten the hang of Angular, then start adding in more modules. Code reusability. Yeah. Okay. So that's the app.js. Next up, let's set up the controller. So in order to set up a controller, you have to specify off the bat. Let's make this one again. Okay, let's specify which module. So you have to specify that you want your controller to be a part of the Angular module called intro Angular. This is where if you had multiple modules, you can specify a different module that you want this file to be a part of. So this could be a part of your Angular helpers module instead of the intro Angular module. Yeah, if you really want to get into that. And when you call this Angular module with just a single argument, instead of creating a new module, it'll append whatever you do next onto the existing model intro Angular. So if I were to do a common source of error is people will copy paste their app.js into a controller file and accidentally include the second argument. And everything that happens from here on out will break the application because it's thinking Angular sees this second argument and assumes that you're trying to declare a new application instead of modify the existing one. So watch out for that one too. Dot controller, home controller, and we're going to write out home controller here. This here is a variable we have not declared yet, but we're going to declare it very soon by calling function home controller. Do that. So what we're saying is we want to declare a controller called home controller, attach it to the intro Angular module, and we're going to store the code for that controller inside of the home controller function. This part here, the string home controller, has to match your index.html controller name. So home controller here, when Angular sees this in the HTML, it's going to look for a controller with the name home controller. So you have to make sure these two match. The second part though, this home controller, this is just a name we gave it to make it convenient. I could call this, I don't know why I thought of that word, but I called that. And you would just have to make sure the name of the function you have in your file matches the name up here. By convention, people will give it the same name as the name of the controller itself, just so that everything's more clear, but you don't have to. Okay, so inside of the home controller, I'm going to declare a variable. So controllers can contain variables, controllers can contain functions. If you guys remember constructor functions from all the way in Unit 1, you probably don't. It's one of the assessment questions that nobody got, classes and stuff. You can declare it with the same syntax as you did there. So you do this to indicate that you want the variable name to be bound to the controller, and then you give it a key and then a value. This value does not have to be a string, it can be another object if you want. And that object can have more objects and so on and so forth. You can turn it into an entire JavaScript object or array. But for now, I'm just going to stick with the basic string hello world to test it out. So this .test equals hello world. If you check right here in the index.html file, you'll see that we're actually trying to print out this .test. So we're saying, take the contents of home controller, store them into the variable here called home, and then print out the home controller's test variable. And the home controller's test variable is declared here in the JavaScript. It's going to be equal to hello world. So when I look at this page, when it finally opens up, it's going to say test : space hello world. And this first line is going to say test : 2. I think that's all the setup we need, right? Yep. All right, so open this file up in the browser. If everything worked out well, you should see 2 and hello world pop up. You still have those curly braces? If you still have curly braces, check your console. There will be an error there. You got to figure out what that error means. Let's figure it out. Yeah, so, yeah, Angular requires a lot of setup. There's a ton here. I listed like 9 possible errors that could come up. So if you don't see right off the bat the curly braces thing, or sorry, if you see the curly braces thing, step through all of those and see if you have those errors.
Yeah. See, they give you like 100 free, I think. Oh yeah, I've never used my first box. My first box was 100, I think she used like 5. I wouldn't go for that. Make it really nice and sturdy. It's the first one.
Well, we'd be for each other.
The ones that give a lot of you, like they might give you student discount too. I don't think so. Oh no.
Maybe like networking card promotion.
You want it, you might not. You don't want it like you know. You want it satellite discount. So you don't have to use it.
Not take our stars. People will judge
Mine was not working, but I had that good control that you set up earlier. Open that up.
No.
Check the WDI.
I guess you want, we should make it because the design side is I don't know.
I'm gonna walk through. I'm gonna walk through what an Angular error looks like and how you debug stuff in Angular. So I'm going to create. What's a common error? Common error. Let's misspell intro Angular. Call it into Angular. All right, we misspelled this. We should get an error now when we try and load everything up. So we have a mismatch between app.js and our HTML ng app. These two have to be spelled the same. And we get an error right here. Alright, you get this giant list of errors right here. Module intro Angular is not available. You either misspelled the module name or forgot to load it. Blah, blah, blah. I get this because I have AngularJS instead of AngularMin.js, which some of you guys might have. If you're AngularMin.js, the error is even more unintelligible. So actually, what you guys should probably do is switch this min.js to just the regular AngularJS. You'll get better errors at least. It's pretty useful.
You're not thinking about speed at this time.
Yeah. So if you see one of these, you can always click on the link, and the link will take you to another error page that will maybe or maybe not give you more information. In this case, it's just the same as what was available to us here, so nothing really different. Intro Angular is not available. You either misspelled the module name or forgot to load it. Okay. So I go to Intro Angular, I check, oh, I misspelled it, fix it, reload the page. Everything works. So that's what an Angular error looks like. It'll pop up in your console. It'll maybe have an error message. Sometimes it'll just have a link instead of an error message. You just follow the link or read the error message and figure out what's going wrong. Alright. So your turn now. Create a new variable called count in your home controller. So we have test right now. Add another variable called count to the home controller and set it equal to an integer of your choice. And then print out count plus 1 to the screen. So if count is 9, you should be printing 10 out to the screen.
Oh, there. So just that's it. No, 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 no. You can put a value there. Like this is a key, that's a value to logo. So my value. Yeah. So, and then go back to the next. That's
Oh.
oh.
You said 2, right? And then your there. Okay. Okay.
You guys get it?
Divided by one.
You got it? Yeah, you want to do it? Yep, for now. Yep.
So on your home controller JS,
Home controller JS, adding in
you just add this dot count
this dot count.
equals whatever integer, whatever RPI.
With 10. Okay, and then here.
And then you create another div with count. And yeah, then curly braces. And then home dot count. And
Plus 1. Alright. So, we've got a new variable. Close it. Right. Okay, so we've got a new variable, this dot count, set it equal to 10. We've got a new line, a new div, count, home dot count plus 1. It's 11. So we should get 11 printed out here and just count 11. By the way, this little bracy thingy that shows up right before, or like flashes for a second, and you're wondering what's going on, that's it takes a second for Angular to actually load. So Angular has to, what happens is first the HTML parses through, and then Angular goes back and then reparses the HTML as Angular code instead of as HTML. Right. It injects itself into there. So in between, while it injects itself, it does that, and there's some way to prevent that. ng cloak.
I like it.
Where do we stick it?
Harry Potter, baby.
Where do we stick ng cloak?
You just throw that bad bitch on right here.
Right there?
Just do ng cloak, and then you gotta go grab the CSS from the API, and then you throw it in your main CSS. It won't work without the CSS.
Okay.
Just do ng cloak.
ng cloak.
Go down.
Right here?
Yep.
So I gotta put this in as,
Yeah, just make a inline CSS, or just do main.css, and just
CSS, I've got a
throw
main.css.
it in there.
Put it in there, include the file. So link equals CSS, main.css. Ooh, okay. That's nice.
ng cloak.
Cloak. Alright. Okay, so to get that,
Not to cut you off, I'm sorry. But you want to use ng cloak per data line. Where
oh,
you're
so
trying to-
every controller?
Yeah, so you want to put it
okay.
per div or per.
Okay.
You don't want to cloak the entire body, is what I'm saying.
Okay.
Yeah. Like just like you wouldn't want to put a controller on the entire body. Same idea.
Okay, so normally you wouldn't have a controller on the whole body. Normally you wouldn't have a cloak on the whole body. But if you, for now, we can just stick it here. ng cloak will prevent that little flashy thingy from coming up. Include your CSS file, which we forgot to do last time. And then include this guy, which I'll slack out to you. ng cloak. Include that. Pretty cool.
I did two different instead of controller. I did a function hello count.
You do.
The second one's working, but the first one's not.
No, what do you mean?
Flag it out.
Sure. Okay, you should not have two separate ones, no. Has to be one controller. One controller can only have one function associated. You can have multiple controllers, but they have to have different names at that point. We're about to do that. And, yep.
You should be on the ng cloak thing is, I see it on your, you should not, it's also.
I slacked it out.
Oh,
ng cloak. Yep.
And this goes in CSS file.
Huh?
This goes in CSS.
In CSS, yep. So yeah, let me just pull it back up here too. And .css right there. Can we cover what these mean? This is a. It's basically saying. This is the one that really matters right here. It's saying the brackets are attribute searches. So you're searching these brackets. Search for HTML elements that contain that specific attribute. So it looks for anything with an ng cloak attribute. So right here, ng cloak, and it matches that, and it hides it. Okey-doke. So I should pause for a second and mention that this is actually a ton of code that you guys would have had to write in order to get this to work without this. Once you've got everything set up, you're literally just adding in 2 lines of code and then 2 lines of code in the HTML. So you have 1 line of code in HTML, 1 line of code in JavaScript. Later on, when we do updates to this, so if I change this .count to, so let me do this, set timeout. Actually, I'm going to have to do some like function. So after 5 seconds, let's update the count to 50. Or maybe I should just do something even simpler. Every second, sub.count plus equals 1. Okay. I think you guys remember doing a timer way back, and how many lines of code it took, and it involved a lot of JavaScript manipulation and doing DOM manipulation. This right here is enough in Angular to do an actual timer. So if I pull this page up, yeah, that was wonderful, wasn't it? What went wrong here?
I saw it. It changed so fast.
It changed back.
Damn.
That's why.
Run the function in the console so you can
How do you run it in the console?
just
Would it be what itself?
It's a control, C.
no improvements in there. My God. I hope I don't teach.
10,
Whoa.
11, 12, 13, 14. So what's wrong? Why isn't it
You never bring it up right on
this end?
that
Got
side.
home.count. What else do I need? Do I have this thing? Huh? What's wrong? You know what? I have to use the Angular version. Yay. Okay, there we go. Alright, yeah, Angular, so sometimes the DOM won't update properly. And that's because Angular, there's an actual function in the background that does DOM updates. So Angular has its own version of every single JavaScript function you can imagine. Like literally instead of set interval, there's a $interval function that exists in Angular. It's going to get kind of annoying including all of them, but if you do it, it'll make it all work. You have a counter implemented. So every time we update the variable, you notice we don't have to do a JavaScript or jQuery manipulation. It automatically updates the front end for you. So that's going to be really cool when we have like giant objects and we need to update. Instead of 1 field, we want the JSON to update 70 fields in the page at the same time. We're going to be able to use a for loop, just set the variables, and all 70 things will update at the same time. It'll be really cool. Yeah. Let's not have this for now. Okay.
So the dodging interval, they literally have like their own version of like every method.
Yeah, it wraps the set interval method. No, not for jQuery, but for JavaScript.
Okay.
It wraps. There's a lot of wrappers around JavaScript methods.
And then you would probably in the real world would want to inject interval into Angular.mod, right?
Yeah. So like you do like Angular, what was it? Home controller dot inject or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
something
Okay.
Like that.
I think I go over that later somewhere here.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's see. Okay. What are we at next? Nested controllers. All right. So we're talking about scoping of the controllers. So we're saying inner scopes have access to outer scopes. Outer scopes do not have access to inner scopes. It says here same as for functions. So we're going to create a new file called JS controllers. That should not say controller. That's a typo. Car controller.js. We've got a brand new file here called car controller. That is completely empty right now. And here's another really common error, is every time you create one of these files, you have to include it in your index.html. People will forget to do that all the time and wonder why their file isn't working. So always make sure you include your file in your index.html. Okay. So inside of our home controller, we are going to include a new div. So the car controller, just like we did div controller earlier, new div ng controller equals car controller as car. Okay. Inside of here, I'm going to run home test, home.test. So what's going on? And a car test. Car.test. Okay. Kaylee, what is home.test going to be equal to here? Inside of the car controller. So here it's hello world. What's it going to be here? Hello world, right. It's the inner function has access to the outer, so it'll still be hello world. What'll car.test be right now? Yep, whatever we make it equal to. Right. Yep. We'll set that up in a second. Let's assume I've set up car.test for a second. What if I call car.test right here? What will I get outside of the car controller? Undefined, because car is outside of its scope, so it will not be defined right here. We'll see that pop up in a second. So let's go to our car controller page. Angular.module, intro Angular, .controller, car controller. Okay. So define the module that it's part of, define the controller name, make sure the controller name, car controller, matches the controller name here, car controller. You can create the function. So we can have access to things. And like we do with all little test stuff, we'll do hello world and goodbye world as our two. Okay. What are we at? Let's open this up. Bring up the HTML to view it, look at while we're doing this. Okay. So I get, let me do car test right here. Car test. Car test. Okay, so car test comes up undefined outside, but inside it comes up as home test, car test. I put little H1s here to indicate car controller. Home controller. So in home controller, we've got these. Car test is undefined. In car controller, both are defined. Okay, who's got errors? Car controller is not undefined. Go to your car controller page. Yeah, controller is the car controller.
Oh yeah, yeah, it's
What else is there? What's the error? Okay, so we've got home controllers, we've got car controllers. Same thing now, create an object this time instead of a string. So create an object called car in the car controller and prints the car's make and model onto the screen. So instead of strings, we're doing objects now. How do we do that? Essentially, instead of calling this variable car, call it my car. So just so we don't confuse, call it my car, so that there's no conflict between the variable names.
The new one we're making.
Yeah, new one you're making, store it in the variable my car. And this not my car. You have to handler, you have to inject any model interval. Basically, you turn to everything in state. There's no way to use that. Okay. Corbin, you get it? Alright, let's do it. Oh yeah, car controller. What do I set up here?
This guy. You want to put my car.
My car.
Ford. Mustang.
Yeah, thanks. Alright. What do we put here?
Car make model. Oh, this. Car make model.
Car make, model, sure. No, you do car dot my car. Huh? That's it? That's it? So I do this. Get the annoying little object printed out. What if I just want Ford Mustang to show up? Car dot my car dot model. So that'll give me Mustang if I want the make and then the model. So if I want the make and the model together. You can do it twice. So car.mycar.make. Close it, give it a space in between. So it'll put a space between the two. And then model. I'll do Ford Mustang. That's one way to do it. The other way to do it would be make let's model. So you can do, we said, any JavaScript operations or Angular operations in here. So inside here, you can do string concatenation. It's your call, whichever way you want to do it. You got errors? There's errors. Okay. You guys are going to try this one. So there's another directive you're going to look up called ngRepeat, which is like the for loop for Angular. Try and see if you can use it. Create an array of 3 car objects. So you're going to have this dot cars. It's going to be an array of objects. Make 3 car objects, make some models, and try and use ngRepeat to print them all out to the screen. Yep. So, yeah. So this part I'll just include. So let's say we take make our Nissan model what? GTR. Make Mazda. you spell it?
Oh, Lard. At the end. No, no. A-R-D-O.
Gallardo. Alright. Everybody think they got it? Alright, I'll do this now. So we have this array. If you look up ng repeat, so there's a lot of these. ng repeat isn't the only one. There's a lot of Angular directives that are built into Angular that allow you to do things. In order to use ng repeat, go to the index.html, do div ng repeat equals c in car.cars. So what this will do is it'll create a for loop where c is the iterating value. I'm going to print out c.make, something the iterating variable, make a model c.make space c.model. So what this will do is it'll repeat this one time, so sorry, one for each of the car. It prints it out. You get the 3 makes and models printed out.
Why don't we just do car and cars? And cars. This is your array called cars?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can just do car and cars.
Doesn't work
Oh, no.
because it has to be car.cars. So it's the controller.
you put car controller
Yeah,
as
so it's
car.
car.cars. Yeah. So you've got the array with 3 objects in it. As you iterate through it, this c value here is going to be equal to each of these objects in turn. So c.make the first time will be Nissan, c.model GTR, and it goes through the list. And that's how you do basically for loops with HTML elements. So if this was an array of 500 elements, you could easily repeat through all of them. What did I just do here? Yeah. You can easily repeat through all of them and print them all out to the screen instead of going through each of them one by one and printing them out, or using some sort of JavaScript to do it. Yeah, this is an Angular version of a for loop. And you repeat. Alright. We're going to take another break for like 5 minutes. And then come back and start on the lab, and then finish the lab when we get back from lunch.
But where did you get the C again? I'm sorry.
C is just whatever, it's just what I decided to call it. I could call it D, I could call it E. As long as when I make that change, I change these as well. So it's like in a for loop, you have like for I in, with like the I.
Okay.